Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bultan of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals, to state senators, to mayors, to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about.
In today's episode, I speak with Joanna McClinton, who's an inspiration and making history as the first woman Speaker of the Pennsylvania House. The Speaker and I talk about her career and her journey to the State House, including, like so many women, in her words, having to get out of her own way to overcome doubt to run for public office. We discuss what the job of Speaker entails, including keeping order in the House, as well as her work on issues ranging from voting rights to education funding, championing the Crown Act to prohibit hair-based discrimination in the workplace, and protecting doctors and access to abortion care in the wake of the overturning of Roe. We also talk about the narrow one-seat majority Democrats are currently hanging on to in the House, and how she intends to pick up seats and keep Pennsylvania in the blue column nationally come November. I hope you enjoy. All right, Speaker McClinton, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thank you, Debbie. So glad to be here.
Okay, so I'm so happy to have you, and I'm going to do something that I don't normally do. I never read people's bios on the show, but I have to start with just flagging some things that make you and that are just amazing. So really, you are a lady of firsts in the Pennsylvania legislature. And when I saw this, I just really couldn't believe it, that when you were in 2018, when you became the first woman and first African-American to be elected to the House Democratic Caucus as the House Democratic Caucus Chair. And then in 2020, you became the first woman elected House Democratic leader in the institution's 244-year history, which is a whole conversation about the fact that there hadn't been a woman before that, but that we can dive into that. And then in 2023, of course, when you were elected the first woman to ever be Speaker of the House. So I just have to say, that's amazing. And I'm so grateful for you being here with us and to share your story and to share what it's like being Speaker of the Pennsylvania legislature and what's going on in your state. But I just had to start with that because that is an amazing historical track record, and you rock. I'll just start there.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here and so excited to be a New Deal leader. It's about 9 months and counting. Who's counting? But it's been really beneficial to learn and grow and be involved with so many different leaders across our nation, inspired every day by our various work.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And we love having you being part of it. You are inspiring. Let's start with maybe just, getting to where you are and getting to be Speaker. Did you start out in life thinking that you wanted to be an elected official in politics? Was this something that you did growing up, or how did this all come about?
Well, you got me blushing there. I definitely did not start out wanting to be an elected official at all. From first, second grade, wanted to be a lawyer, a preacher, an actress, and a hairdresser. Never knew anything about politics. I went with my mom to vote. I didn't know what was going on for the first few years. Then, of course, as you get older, you start to put the pieces together and understand, we're electing people to do jobs. But once again, was not interested, got to college and followed my mentor's advice in high school. I majored in political science because she majored in political science and went to law school afterwards. I did so many internships as a college student. Zero interest in a career in politics. Went to law school, got out of law school, became a public defender for almost 10 years in Philly. Loved going to court, representing people, fighting. But at some times, leaving court, I'd ask myself, what more could I be doing as a person, as an individual to, help my clients, but not being in court representing them? And that led me to my second legal job, working as the chief counsel to my state senator, here in Harrisburg. I was here every time there was session, and then back home in our neighborhood in his district office when we were not up here voting, and even working in his office. The true confession is never thinking I'd be a state lawmaker or run for political office. And a few years into that job, my state representative in my neighborhood resigned. And the senator said, Joe, you should run. And I'm like, like most women, Debbie, you know the statistics better than me. I was not interested. Yes. I was just like, nope, I have a good job. I'm in the government. I'm making change. I don't need to be an elected official. And first of all, I don't even need to be a candidate and run for office because the idea of that felt beyond me and like something I wasn't prepared for because I didn't have political background. I'm a lawyer, studied poli-sci, but like years before, no network. I was just like, no, that's not for me. And fast forward, there was a special election coming, whether the candidate was me or not. And, I just really took the time to say, if I don't try, how will I feel? And I recognized I would feel regret. So 9 summers ago, I got out of my own way and out of my head, and I ran for state representative. And I'm so grateful that my neighbors give me the privilege to be here. And years later, that my colleagues have helped me make history because every one of those roles, they had a vote.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love everything you said, and I just want to double click, if you will, on the point about women running for office, because it is, I mean, you know it too. We know it. You have to recruit candidates as in your current role. Women are reluctant to want to do it because they are, and they're like, oh, but I don't have this one thing. And I talk to even New Deal leaders sometimes, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at your resume. You have all of the qualifications. It's like, yeah, but I didn't have this one really specific thing. And anyways, it's a hurdle that women have to overcome. So I just want to say that is something that I hope all women who are listening, thinking about running for office, you can do it. You don't have to know everything. You have the chops, you have the skills you need. But then I also kind of want to dive in on what you ended with there, which is, it is really impressive that, as you said, all of those positions that I talked about at the top are elected positions by your peers. Like what do you think goes into choosing someone for these roles? Like, what are people looking for? What skills do you think that they saw in you that they said that makes a leader? That's somebody we want leading our caucus.
Well, I'll say that when I first ran to be in the leadership team, that was 2018. I had only been a member of the House for 3 years. So I just figured, quite frankly, I didn't have anything to lose. I wasn't certain I'd win at all, but I just said I should try. And I had some colleagues suggest that I try and, work with me to try to see how can we get votes. But, the feedback was on, you seem like you won't change if you get a title, and you also seem like you'll work hard to help the members because, of course, that's a big part of leadership, what you do in the building, but what you do outside politically to support them. And I'll just say, as every 2 years, the last few years have come around, I've just been blessed that we've gotten more members and Democrats elected. And I think that they really see that I care about them, that I want to listen to them. I want to not just lead them, but work with them to get to solutions from the state government level. So I'm grateful, but I hope they see the good things in me that have given them the opportunity. And I'm happy to say that in every leadership election, including for Speaker, our colleagues had choices. I was not unopposed in anything. And so I'm even more grateful that with contested races, I've been able to garner their support every time.
Yeah. And I want to come back to a point, which is actually caucus. You are Speaker in a caucus that is so narrowly divided, literally one vote. So I want to come back to that and coming elections that are coming up and things like that. But I do want to just wonder, I wonder for some of our listeners, they might not know what the Speaker does, right? They hear Speaker of the House. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? What are your responsibilities?
So we're in Harrisburg right now. So I am a running session. We're on a break, but running session means making sure that every member who wants to get up and give speech on debate, wants to talk about a bill or an amendment, wants to make a motion about how to proceed on a bill, that I am essentially the referee. I'm not a glorified referee, but I referee the debate. I keep order in the House. I maintain decorum. Should someone get out of order, there's a big gavel to the right of me that I use in a little stand that makes a really resounding noise. So they know, like, oh, she's talking to me. Yep. In addition to that, I am outside of the floor a leader in our party. In the Democratic Party, I'm a leader in our party, and I'm able to, speak on behalf of our caucus about our priorities. I do a ton of interviews. I also consider myself like the lead cheerleader for every member. I get to a lot of districts. I get to tell them, what our partnership looks like, what they are doing when they're in the Capitol. And it's pretty exhilarating. I'll say that.
Yeah, and busy and a lot, but a super important job. So, and you guys have had really a ton of successes in Pennsylvania this year, and you personally have done a lot of championing some fantastic bills and work, and I want to talk about some of that. I thought I'd start with something I know is kind of your signature bill, as I understand it, which is some of the work around voting and elections. Tell us a little bit about why that's so important to you and what some of those provisions that you were championing are.
Absolutely. So when we think about, all these rights under attack in this day and age, voting is the number one fundamental right that we have to still be vigilant in protecting and defending democracy. So I have worked on legislation for the past few years to make sure that voting is not just easier, but there's more access. Registering to vote is easier, that you don't have any deadlines in the way of you participating in an election, that you not only know how to vote by mail, but it's not going to be rejected because the rules are simpler. Pennsylvania, we're only in our fourth year with really mail-in voting, and it's no excuse that's needed. You don't have to be deployed in the military or on vacation. You can just request a ballot, but we've had some trouble with making sure that it's uniform and everybody's applications are accepted. So I've been working with our administration on that and have a legislation to make sure that there's same-day voter registration, to make sure that in addition to that, there's electronic poll books to be able to verify who people are. Legislation that did pass the House so far is to make it so that every county elected election office can pre-canvass. That simply means take the mail-in votes out, sort and organize them so that we're not waiting 4 days, after November to determine who won Pennsylvania's election. Just kind of make things more efficient and really to restore trust, because some in Pennsylvania don't have the trust they should in our election system.
Yeah, you guys really were kind of ground zero. You were talking about that 2020 during all the craziness of elections, and the part you talked about in terms of pre-canvassing was a big part of it, right? It's because of your law where you couldn't start looking at ballots, and then there was all this, falsehood about shenanigans happening when really that's just the process of when you can start counting and all of that. So I'm just wondering, like, since 2020, do you feel like in the legislature, is it still a consensus issue, like down party lines, or is there more consensus that there needs to be clarity, or what's going on?
So, Debbie, you're hitting the nail on the head. Pennsylvania was ground zero for the big lie. People looked at the 6th of January with so much sadness, grief, concern for people literally trying to throw out our votes. I mean, it was deadly. Law enforcement came under attack. But there also were people who live here in the masses, and we led the nation in the number of people arrested who were down there being violent, not at a peaceful protest, not at a rally, but that went and breached the Capitol and were behaving violently and trying to overthrow our government. So it is still contentious. When our pre-canvassing bill passed just a couple months ago in the House, there were members in the Republican Minority Caucus that stood up and said, now we don't know what's going to happen in November, trying to sow seeds already. I guess the next big lie. So we are fighting the fight here in PA. People think, oh, it's in the South or it's here. Like, no, it's where we are too. We are a state that's in the Mid-Atlantic region. Some will say Northeast, but it is very much breeding ground. And there are lots of Republicans still trying to spread number 45's lies, deceptions that people can't believe in mail-in balloting and believe that it's safe. So we are working very hard to restore trust. While our bills haven't gotten to the finish line yet, we do have a state Senate that's controlled by Republicans, so they pick and choose what they want to run. We've been working with our administration and getting the rules changed and more uniform so that especially people filling it out get to see like, okay, here's where I have to sign. So it's counted and their votes are, not counted by our local elected officials. But I am hopeful that as we get into the fall, that we will see at least the pre-canvassing bill get to the governor's desk, because that will give us days and days and days of our time back, and we will know much sooner, probably the day after, Tuesday, November 5th, who won Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Well, and, I think that I'm glad to hear you're working on that. I think that's super important. I know that the governor, also a former New Deal leader in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, this is something he cares a lot about, I know. And Al Schmidt, who he's appointed to oversee elections statewide, is somebody who we've had talk to our group because he's just, I think, did such a good job in 2020 of standing up. So I'm hopeful that you guys will be a beacon of what can happen to move the rest in the right direction on this.
We'll be back to this conversation after this short break.
In a time of social media hyped partisan scream fests, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that plenty of people on the other side aren't stupid or evil. I'm political scientist Mike Baranowski, and my podcast, The Politics Guys, is built on the belief that for democracy to work for everyone, we have to be willing to really listen to each other and have meaningful conversations about where and why we differ. I hope you'll join me and my intellectually and ideologically diverse group of co-hosts as we work to understand our differences and seek common ground. You can find us at politicsguys.com or in your podcast app.
I feel like another part of restoring trust, as you were talking about, you're talking about elections, but another sort of kind of restoring trust in democracy is also making government work well and, and actually delivering. And I just want to point out another thing that Pennsylvania, when I think about Pennsylvania these days, is really that amazing effort for you guys to fix the freeway in a record amount of time. I know that was largely in partnership with the federal government, but I don't know if you want to say anything about that, because I just feel like it's one of the things I point to a lot when people say government can't do anything. I say, oh, really? We'll talk to the state of Pennsylvania and how and what they did to open a freeway after a major collapse. And, what are your thoughts either on that, or just on generally the kind of making government work better?
So I think what happened in 2023 on 95 North in June, we had a tragedy. We had someone who goes to work every day like most of us do, got off the highway on 95 North as that driver had done many times. And sadly, this time, the truck overturned. And as a result, a fire started and became very deadly. That we lost the driver. And unfortunately, after losing the driver, the fire got so out of control that parts of the highway started to collapse. And it is a major artery to connect New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, down into Maryland and all across. And it seemed like, it would be devastating because of how much traffic would be interfered. But our governor, former New Deal leader, Josh Shapiro, worked tirelessly with President Joe Biden, with our Secretary Pete Buttigieg. I mean, you saw our PennDOT, our state highway folks work in a collaborative way so that in 12 days, the highway was completely drivable, safe, the lanes were restored, and of course, some more work occurred after that, but just making sure people didn't have to keep going around those few miles, it saved so much. And everybody was shocked. Everybody was astonished, and it was a headline for a while. And I was out there that day on the highway, and some of my friends were like, "You're the only girl out there." I said, "Yeah, it's the ladies. We play a role." And of course, there were women that worked on the project there, but they didn't see officials that were women there yet pictured with the governor. But it was major because people think, why should I vote? what difference does it matter who's the governor or who's the president? What difference does it matter? But it's things like that, Debbie, that actually do show it matters who's holding these offices and positions.
It really does. And that focus on results was amazing. You guys deserve so much credit for that. I want to stay with a couple other issues that I know are important to you that I just want to make sure we get a chance to touch on. And one that is really an issue across the country, but I'm not sure a lot of people know about, is the Crown Act, something that you have been a champion of, and this anti-discrimination kind of legislation. I know because so many New Deal leaders are working this on around the country, but I'm always surprised that this is not something in a lot of the public's knowledge. Tell us about the Crown Act, what it does, and where it is in the legislative process.
Absolutely. So for 4 years straight, I worked on the Crown Act, and CROWN is an acronym. It stands for Creating a Respectful Open World for Natural Hair. And that bill would just end hair-based discrimination in the workplace, making sure that, God forbid, you miss out on an opportunity for an internship or a job because you show up like how I'm sitting here. For those who are listening and are not watching, I've got my natural hair as it grows out my head in natural curls. We don't want people to miss opportunities, and we're seeing states all around, including Republican-controlled states, 26 at this point that have passed it in their state legislative bodies. So I had the bill for 4 years, and our caucus was in the minority. And of course, we changed hands after the 2022 election. And last year in early July, the bill moved from the House and went over to our state Senate. So we've been waiting for a year plus. However, there are some serious conversations going on with the committee chair where the bill is, and with our statewide business association, who has been concerned with some of the language. And we're working to find compromise. You know, we're not one of those folks who say we don't want the good for the perfect. No, we will take the good because we want to send a message to employers, and we want to send a message to communities of color, which are all across Pennsylvania. I said at one of the press conferences, you know, there's not a district where at least one constituent could benefit from this legislation. And it ended up passing the House in an overwhelmingly bipartisan way. Almost over 2/3 of the House supported the bill. So we're hoping that our Republican-controlled Senate will let it loose by the fall and get it to the governor's desk, because it will mean so much. And people think, Debbie, that folks of color, you know, don't make hard decisions when it comes to hair. They choose one look or another. But I'll just say, if I can testify, that, you know, all through law school, all through defending the public, I always made a conscientious decision on how I was showing up with my hair, because I wanted people to respect me. I wanted my clients to respect me. I wanted my judges to respect me. And I always struggled with looking young, being confused for, you know, the intern, the social worker, and these are great professions, interns and social workers out here. I wanted to be respected. So I always was making decisions on how my hair should be professional and what that means and how it looks. So if I did that in my own little lived experience, there's so many more people who've done similarly with making decisions on how they're showing up, whether they would like to wear locks, but they think, oh, it's not going to work at my job. If we can change this law, adding a little bit of language to our statewide human relations code, it will let employers, first of all, know if this is something that has happened on your watch, it's not okay and it has to stop.
Yeah. Thank you for your work on that. I mean, I do think it's something that just is not really widely known. And to your point, it's a big deal. 26 states, as you said. So I think just thank you for that. Education. I'm just rattling through some issues here that I know that you care about, and I know that are so important in Pennsylvania and across the country. Education's a big one. Pennsylvania is unique, right? And as I understand it, you're at the Supreme Court level potentially, right? The way you fund schools or how the schools have been historically funded was found unconstitutional. So you guys are having to deal with that in the legislature. Tell us what that means, and what's kind of, where do you go from here?
So you've got it. There was a lawsuit that took almost 10 years to get a decision from our appellate court about how it's very unfair how our taxpayer dollars are spent in schools. Essentially, what we've been doing in Pennsylvania is giving every school district the same amount of money for 20 plus years, regardless on whether or not their district has grown or shrunk in population, regardless on whether they have English language learners, regardless on how many special needs students they have there. Our formula usage for school funding hasn't been consistent, and the court has told us it hasn't been fair. So we are working to repair that bridge, proverbially speaking. And the goal is to make sure that in every part of PA, there is a good public school everywhere. We don't want families to, up and relocate because they say, oh, I can't live here. I can't raise my children here because the school's not going to be good. And the first and fundamental way that we have a responsibility to do it, according to our state constitution in Pennsylvania, is to fund the schools fairly. So we got the decision over a year ago. We made a small progress in our budget last year, and our budget this year, we're taking a bigger stride. I'll say it's not a step, it's a stride, but there is still ways to go on it. And we want to make sure that particularly, as the first woman to lead the chamber, that it's been number one on my priority, that we don't waver, that we don't cede. We know we have to compromise all the time with the budget, but that school districts begin to see the change starting this year. And I'm proud to say that they will be seeing changes in their funding, and that we have reset the formula so that for the next 6 years, they will begin to see more and more increases until we get to that adequacy level that the court determined that we must do. And of course, we are willing participants because it changes the outcome for everybody. It helps us in our full society to give children all that they can have, that they should have, and see them live up to their potential because they're not being shortcutted in their schools, that they'll be given everything they need to get ready for, the jobs of the future. So we're very excited to lead the charge on fairly funding our schools.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so awesome. And then last issue for you, I know it's another one that's, there's more. These are just the ones I picked, but there's plenty more you're doing. But another one I know is close to your heart is, of course, choice. And when I was doing a little research for this, this conversation we were going to have, I was shocked to see that the post-Dobbs, that before Dobbs, you guys had 100 clinics statewide, is what I was reading, that performed abortion care. And after Dobbs, you're down to about 20. So I guess I'm curious about how you're seeing the Dobbs decision, the overturn of Roe, for those who aren't familiar with Dobbs, has played out in Pennsylvania, and what it has meant for kind of reproductive and generally health care for women in your state.
So when the Supreme Court overturned Roe, 49, almost 50 years of legal precedent ensuring that our right to privacy as women includes our right to all health care. And of course, health care includes abortion care. We were all shocked. I thought, and this is just me being optimistic, Debbie, I thought when the leak occurred in April of 2022 and there was an outcry across the whole nation, that the Supreme Court would wake up and say, oh, this isn't a good decision. People are protesting and there's not even a decision. But unfortunately, in June, they went ahead with that decision saying, oh, it's no guaranteed right. And as a result, there were instantly more than a dozen states where abortion became legal already, like just automatically. And then there were dozens more that went into their state legislative bodies and changed their laws so that with the rare exception cases that abortion is not accessible. And unfortunately, they have even criminalized in state legislative bodies practitioners providing this care to women. And it's just outrageous. And in Pennsylvania is no exception. 2 years ago, when our caucus was in the minority and I was minority leader, our chamber, then held by Republicans, were doing the first out of a two-step requirement to do an abortion ban here. They passed it. Thank goodness we switched over power in 2023. I got the gavel, so that bill hasn't come up for the second step needed. But we know in our one-seat majority, we're one vote away from having an abortion ban here. And it is something that is outrageous. It's outrageous. There's now 1 in 3 women all across the country that don't have access. But more importantly, when we think about some of the crises, the ongoing problems in communities, maternal mortality is huge in communities of color. Women that look like me, Black and brown women, dying at higher rates and giving birth more than white women. So when we talk about reducing access, it's not just at the start. There's so many different personal, private decisions that have to be made. And we've got to respect the privacy of a woman and her doctor. I always say on the floor, there's only one extra seat in that room. There's not room for the legislature. There's not room for the Supreme Court. So we've passed some bills here to be able to protect women. The first one that we passed was to protect doctors, to make sure that anyone who has to come into Pennsylvania, because some states that surround us do not have even as much access as we do. West Virginia is one, and we don't want doctors to be criminally penalized. So that went over to our state Senate. We expanded access to contraception, which is significant and huge. That went over to the state Senate just a few weeks ago here. And we are now trying to see what does it look like to have enshrined in our Constitution the right to an abortion. So it's very important. Everywhere I go, all across the state, even in the most rural parts of Pennsylvania, women say to me, thank you for holding up the banner, fighting for our rights. There's no way my children and my grandchildren should have less rights than I did. And so many of them tell me we thought that fight was over, but clearly we see it is not. So we're in the mix and working very hard to ensure that that freedom is respected and that there ends up being more access, not less, here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Thank you for your work on that. Do you think that those bills are going to pass in the Senate, or are they going to, what's your sense of that? A couple of those things you said that you were working on.
So some of them probably will not pass them right away. In some ways, I think the state Senate is holding a lot of our bills, waiting to see if our one seat majority is a fluke or something that's here to stay that they have to respect. So I can't wait until we have something called sign a die, where session goes a little bit past the election. We come back and it's like, we're here to stay. It's not a fluke. It's not a one-time thing. You're going to send some of those bills back because they are bills that are widely respected. Polls done in Pennsylvania, nonpartisan ones, show that most Pennsylvanians, over 75%, support women's rights to choose. So we should not be doing things that are in the opposite direction.
No, you're so right. And I think that's exactly right. And I love what you said about rural women too. I mean, we've seen it right around the country, like, Kansas and Virginia and Ohio and all these states where people thought that, Kentucky, people are very clear on this issue, actually. And but I do wonder, it's a great segue to talk for a minute about elections. I mean, do you think that choice will be a driver of bringing people out to the polls? And we've said it a couple times, but it's important maybe to mention, people might not know this, you guys have the largest state legislature, full-time state legislature in the country, right? You're the second overall, because New Hampshire is bigger, but they're only part-time. 203 members in your caucus, correct? So this is a huge caucus, and you are separated by literally one vote, as we've said a couple times. So this isn't like 39-40. This is 200. You have a lot. It's a lot of people and only one vote separating. So, do you think that choice is an issue that maybe gets you a bigger majority come November? Or what's your outlook, and what are you guys doing to try to think about growing your numbers?
Absolutely. So it's 102. 101. It is on the line. We are literally on the edge every day here. And I do think that choice is on the ballot, and that voters who thought, things like that would never be a problem in PA, realized, 2 years ago when our Republicans were in charge in the House, that they will ban abortion as soon as they can. It is not a talking point. It is not a joke. It is something that we need to protect. And I am certain, just when I look at the 2023 outcome, 2023, we were not on the ballot, but our Supreme Court had an open seat. And all of the talk was on, will they elect a Democratic person or will they elect the Republican? And so many people were like, well, we got to protect choice in PA because we don't know what's going on in the Supreme Court down in DC. They're just throwing people's rights out. And the candidate won in 112 Republican districts. Now, I'm not saying this November I'm coming back with 112 Democrats. I'm saying that person won in 112 districts. That's all I'm saying. So we are working very hard to let the folks in those communities know that, not only was that a good choice in the odd year, the highest court of our Commonwealth, but realize at the bottom of the ticket this year, a representative is going to go to Harrisburg to be your voice. And you want that voice to be someone that protects women, your daughters, your nieces, your goddaughters, that is not going to say, oh, I'll do whatever the Republican Party line leadership tells me to do. No, someone that will be a strong, bold voice. So we're getting that message out and letting people know, yes, we are focused on the White House, but in the State House, we have some things to do too. We're all on this ticket this November, and we are going to work very hard so that it is not razor thin come 2025, 2026. But I'll be on this podcast saying, oh, Debbie, we picked up. Here's what we want. I look forward to that. I love it.
I'm looking forward to that too. Let me end with the last question. We'll stay on politics for a minute, which is, it is so important what happens in state houses. And I think our listeners know that. Actually, you guys are on the front lines of so much. But of course, Pennsylvania is also in the swing state presidential column, that all eyes will be on Pennsylvania as usual. What do you think? And it probably is, presumably this may be the same answer about what you're going to do with the state, how are you going to win seats in the state house, and how will we keep Pennsylvania blue at the national level? But what are you hearing from people in your state about what issues matter most to them? What is the kind of the blueprint for Democrats being successful in November in your state?
So people in this point are, counting down to November. You got the folks who are deeply rooted into politics like us. And then you have folks who are not thinking about November yet because it sounds far away, like something right before Thanksgiving. It doesn't seem like anything that they should be worried about now. And then you have the folks who watch the news all day. And those are many seniors. They are very concerned, and they want to make sure that everyone they know makes the right decisions this November, because it's not a joke. The 45th president is an existential threat to our freedoms and to our democracy. It is very clear that he is looking for a tyrannical regime, and he just wants to do whatever he wants. People that have heard about Project 2025 and read about it in Pennsylvania are concerned about it. And what I will say is, while we are a swing state, while President Biden was in the White House in 2021, we won 2 appellate court races out of 3. In 2022, we flipped the House. In 2023, we won the Democrat one, for Supreme Court. So we're working hard to let everybody know this, and we look forward to folks being able to say, oh, what's it going to do? Blue, red, purple, but I wore my blue today.
You did wear your blue today. I love that you wore your blue today. That's probably a good omen that you wore your blue today. I like that. Well, I so appreciate all that you're doing, both on the legislative side, as we talked about some of those critical issues, and also on the electoral side. And I hope that you're right. I mean, I do feel like something that gets lost in the conversation sometimes is that, Democrats have been doing pretty well over the last few cycles, including when no one thought we would in 2022. I think because of what's at stake, and because people understand the threats to democracy and to freedoms and to other things. So, as we say, from your lips to God's ears, hopefully that we will we will be sitting here in blue with more people behind you come November. But
we'll be in this office.
in that office for sure. But it was so nice to have you on. I'm so grateful for all your work, and for just for being part of our network as well. And all eyes will be on you. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at New Deal for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,